There is a shark in Greenland called the Greenland shark. And when you eat it fresh, it's so toxic that it will first make you go blind, and next it will cause you to die. So what does this shark have to do with sourdough bread? My name is JC and welcome to the Wildbreads podcast. So 600 years ago, the people of Iceland, well, probably the people that lived close to the coast or who lived in coastal areas in Iceland, they basically started to farm these sharks. These sharks, by the way, are very they're deep water sharks. So it's not the sharks that we see on like in movies these days that they eat people and all that stuff. So these sharks are actually safe. No, not safe. I mean, it's not. They don't eat people. But anyway, the point is, so 600 years ago, these sharks were beginning to, people were beginning to hunt these sharks, and they hunted these sharks just for the livers. So for 200 years since they started, they just got the liver and then threw the whole shark, which, from what I've read, is anywhere between 1 ton, like 1,000 kilograms, to about 1,500 kilograms. They throw all of this shark, back into the ocean. Can you imagine the waste? But anyway, so that's how toxic it was. The liver is the only thing that they killed the shark for. Until about 400 years ago, this guy who is like a 4-6 generation shark fermenter or something, he said that 400 years ago, someone accidentally discovered that you can eat the shark if it was left outside to dry for 6 months. So that's half a year. So it's incredible to me how this meat that can kill you can, after a natural fermentation, become one of Iceland's healthiest and safest food to eat. So and that's brought and after I watched that video, it was going around on Facebook 3 weeks ago or so, but I found it on YouTube as well. I'll just put the link in the description. Anyway, it's amazing to me how this shark has a lot of similarities to bread in general, and this is what has really astounded me, because as soon as I watched that video, I immediately remembered there was I think I've read somewhere that bread has this compound called phytic acid, which is originally from the plant itself. So phytic acid, from what I've read earlier, is a compound that's in plant-based things like wheat, rice, beans, legumes, and all that stuff. So there is always a presence of phytic acid. And phytic acid, I'm just going to read the description off of Google. It's a unique natural substance found in plants. It has received considerable attention due to its effects on mineral absorption. So phytic acid impairs the absorption of iron, zinc, and calcium, and may promote mineral deficiency. So therefore, it's often referred to as an anti-nutrient. So with that in mind, and I had a vague understanding of it in the past. So when I was watching the shark video, so after I watched that, I remembered this phytic acid and how I could not forget how in the market, in the farmers market before this pandemic hit, I would occasionally get people from all ages, basically, from people from the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, even up to their 70s, where people would always tell me, these people who come to me for just to tell me, that they would always say that the bread that I make, and it's not because of me, it's because of this naturally fermented, that natural fermentation that these breads go through. They always say that it's only when they eat my bread that their tummies don't go bad, or they don't have discomfort in their tummies, and when they go back to eating bread from a grocery, they would almost always go back to that discomfort, or their tummy would experience discomfort. So back then I would just be amazed, really, and I would look it up and skim through articles about why people experience discomfort, and now that I kind of dove deep into this phytic acid thing, and how it's in some ways toxic to us. It's super interesting because so basically I read a super dense article about this phytic acid, and how it's an anti-nutrient. And so there's phytic acid in plant. It's basically in its bran or something, and then along with it coexists another compound called phytase. So a Google definition again is it's a class of enzyme. No, it's an enzyme that catalyzes the removal of phosphate from either phytic acid or phytate. So from what I understand, this renders this phytic acid that's that's present in plant-based materials. This renders it almost immobile, or renders it powerless. So now, because of the presence of phytases, now we can absorb whatever nutrients or minerals or that's found in plant-based products, like bread, a wheat-based bread, and from what I've read, phytase is released. So look, phytic acid and phytase, they coexist within that plant, and I've also read that phytic acid is just, it's not bad, right? Like other people make it out to be, because it's a natural occurring thing. So it's a natural way for plants to from what the studies say, phytic acid helps plants fight insects or disease or whatever. So it is part of nature as well, and it's good for plants. But for us, for people who for mammals who specifically only have one stomach, like humans, we can't process phytic acid as much, or we can't deal with it as well as mammals that have two stomachs, like cows and I know goats. I'm not sure. Let me see if goats have two stomachs. Goats have two stomachs. Do they? Animals. Okay, so goats, they're called ruminants. Just a little side note here. They're animals with four compartments, four-compartment stomach, such as cattle, sheep, and deer. So that's pretty interesting. So they can process, this, phytic acid that's found in the plants that they eat. Anyway, so again, phytic acid exists in wheat, in corn, in wheat, in rice, in beans, in legumes, and the way for us to encourage, or to activate phytase is through pre-fermentation or fermentation, a naturally occurring one. So pre-fermentation is the process of, I'm pretty sure. Wait, I'm not sure, but pre-fermentation. What are they? So from what I've heard, I've read. Pre-fermentation. Soaking grains is a type of pre-fermentation which encourages the growth, the activation of phytase, and then affects phytic acid, but it's not significant. So other people do sprout things, sprout these plant-based products like sprouted grains and all that stuff. Rice is even sprouted in some countries before they cook it. So roasting is another form of pre-fermentation, and baking and cooking it. Fermentation is done with bread in general, but like the Greenland shark, that meat is also fermented for about. So what they do, as far as that video that I watched was saying, is that they sort of bathe in their own water that I think it becomes ammonia or something. But yeah, so maybe for 2-3 weeks, and then they're left to dry for 4 to 6 months, and they're ready to eat, after they've dried for again half a year. And while phytic acid is not toxic to us humans, some of us are affected by this, by this anti-nutrient, that we should have gotten a lot of vitamins and minerals off of that wheat-based product that we consume, but because of the presence of this one, we don't get as much. So from what I've read too, is that industrial processed flour and bread has very, very low amounts of phytase, because the industrial process, that process is, industrial milling, a grain that's milled not in a stone mill, but in a, like these, stainless steel industrial mills, because there's they're ground or grinded or, super fast. They lose a lot of that phytase. So, and then when it gets to the bakery, where as we've talked about the super fast process of industrially produced breads, where you get bread from mixing to a finished product in 2-3 hours. So that short amount of time is actually not good overall. So whereas in a sourdough process, there's a study that showed that a naturally leavened bread, like a real sourdough bread that's only leavened and fermented by a culture, when you ferment sourdough for 4 hours, for at least 4 hours, so that my guess as a baker is that it includes bulk fermentation, because the moment that you mix that starter in your flour and water and salt, that's when fermentation starts. So if you ferment your sourdough bread for 4 hours, there's a 60% reduction in phytic acid. That's incredible. But if you ferment it for 8 hours, there was a study actually that showed an almost complete elimination of this phytic acid. So and what's really cool in the sourdough community is that because it's trendy, it's also amongst the community, it's also a trend to cold proof or cold ferment your dough or your bread. So that's what we do. That's what we as a community of sourdough bakers do. That's what I also do. So what I do, just to give you an idea, is that I start making my bread for Saturday at 4 a.m. So 4 a.m. I'd feed the starter, and then at 6 a.m. to maybe about 7, I'd start mixing everything, like mix that starter with flour and water for the final count of for final bread count that we've sold that week. And then at around 11, I pre-shape it and then divide. So by that point, it's been fermenting for about 3-4 hours. And then I cold proof that thing, so it slowly ferments, over the course of 10 to 12 hours. So at 12 midnight, I wake up, that's Saturday, and then bake it. So I'm pretty confident of this sourdough process, and how it's easier for people, especially the people who are more sensitive to that to phytic acid. It's just incredible how this ancient way of making bread and food in general has just so many benefits to us as humans. And it's not just sourdough bread, like in most Asian countries, there are fermented soy or something. Korea has what do you call it, kimchi. In Africa, they've got a lot of fermented foods as well. It's all around the world. It's not just plant-based. Some ferment their milk, some ferment their meat. I think making sausages as well, or dried meat, is also a form of fermentation. So it's incredible. What's sad though is that because of this capitalistic society where you need, where, big corporations are profiting from making food cheaper and faster and at scale, is that, like I said in the previous episode, the quality, nutritional quality of most of our food has just plummeted, and it brings me back to to thinking about producing my own slowly prepared food, or also supporting other crafts people, artisans. So supporting other people who ferment other forms of food as well, like people who sell cheese. So we've got plenty of that. These well, here we have a person, I have a neighbor who actually makes cheeses, so that's pretty cool. So yeah, so with all this knowledge about anything that's made fast is, most of the time it's any food that's made quickly is not as good as a food that's prepared traditionally, or prepared in a way that most of our ancestors also prepared them. Wait, where was I? So it's so with that knowledge, I do hope that maybe you can find time to make your own bread, or to ferment your own food. We've got, there's so much there's so many Facebook groups out there that teaches you about kombucha and fermenting your own milk, fermenting your meat and all that stuff, your veggies and all that. So I just believe that it's really worth it to in some form kind of know and do some of these things. If you don't, then look for someone near you who does these things, and support their craft, and that's it. So also, by the way, I just want to mention this on this episode. Sourdough bread is better in many ways, in a lot of ways, in all ways, much better than your bread that you find in groceries, and that's just not because I'm a sourdough bread maker, but the science says it, and people have been feeling good about it. So but again, it's better, but it's even way better if we as bakers, if you're a baker, it's better if we were kind to people who don't do sourdough, and if you're a consumer, then it's basically just good for you if you consume sourdough products. So is there anything else? I guess that's it. I'm probably a little bit all over the place again, but we're trying to improve, and so that's it. I'm just going to do this as much as I can. I mean, as often as we can. Well, that's on Mondays, and hope that I improve as the episodes, that as I put out more more of these podcast episodes. Anyway, if you've got a contribution, or a question about this podcast or podcast episode, or the last episodes, do make a comment or send us a message or whatever. But again, if you've reached this far, thank you very much for being here. I appreciate you. Cheers.